All right, well, good afternoon, Bessie. We're here with Bessie Chronopolis, former mayor of DeKalb and many other things in town, alderperson, I believe, also.
Correct.
Okay,
yes.
And we're also joined by a menagerie of animals. If you want to introduce them, since we will hear them throughout this.
Well, yeah, I'm an animal lover. I'm babysitting for the noisy one. The quiet one is at my feet. Those are dogs. And I've got birds, some parakeets, and a cockatiel who's very quiet, and a very noisy Quaker dwarf parrot who you hear. Her name is Sophie.
Okay, all right. So tell us about your childhood. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Chicago, in what is, I think it's still called the Old Town or the Lincoln Park area. Not too far from Lincoln Park and not too far from the lake, about 8 blocks. And spent my entire childhood there. Let's see. I went to Waller High, graduated from there. And then the next thing I knew, I applied to go to college, and I ended up here at NIU.
Okay, well, let's back up a little bit. When you were in Chicago, what were some of the things you used to like to do in your neighborhood in Chicago?
Well, very heavily involved with our church, St. George. I was in the choir and in youth associations at church, and involved in various things at school. Did some theater. I was actually in a play as a senior. And just the usual kinds of things that you do as a child.
What were your favorite places in Chicago?
Oh, well, Greek Town for sure. We would go often to Greek Town. And the beach, which was, as I mentioned, only about 8 blocks away. I'd hop on the bike and off we'd go.
Okay, because getting around Chicago was always interesting. My parents grew up in Chicago. How'd you get from the Lincoln Park area down to Greek Town?
Usually by bus. We didn't have a car because you really didn't need. The bus was just practically outside your front door, and you just hopped on and off you went, or a taxi or whatever you needed to do. We would often go there to do shopping, especially around Easter time when you'd get your Easter lamb and all the other fixings for the big, huge feasts. My father was 20 years older than my mom. They had quite an age difference. They were only married 8 years before he passed away. And I was a little girl when he died. They owned an apartment building, a 3-story apartment building which was very common back in the day, storefronts downstairs, and then you had the apartments or lofts upstairs. My father was a glass blower. He blew glass for scientific companies, Helene Curtis and other companies that use condensers, test tubes, that kind of thing.
Was he self-employed?
He was self-employed. It was his own. He had his own business. That's what he did. He came here as a young man in 1910, way back when. And
I think I know where he came from, but why don't you give me a little bit of his background?
He came from Greece, the lower part of the Peloponnese, the southern part of Greece, and he was probably between 15 and 18 when he came. And he became quite Americanized over the years. He joined the Moose Club and got very, very involved in a variety of things. He played the trombone and, worked very, very hard to establish his business. And then after the Second World War, he realized that he was older. He was in his mid-50s, and he should get a wife, so somehow there was a connection that he knew in Greece, and my mom had another connection, and they started corresponding. And long story short, he went to Greece, and they got together, and that was that.
And then they came back.
They came back to the States in 1947, and she had gone through some difficult times, lost 3 brothers in the war, and they were occupied by the Germans, and it was rough. It was war is not a pretty thing. So she was very grateful to come here, and Of course, Dad was a naturalized citizen, and Mom became a naturalized citizen too. They loved this country like nobody's business. So this country gave us everything.
So interesting that he was a glass blower. So did he have a shop in your house?
It was downstairs. The shop was down, the factory or the shop, and it had a place where they would cut the glass and where they would heat the glass and blow it to seal it. I got to watch that, of course.
I was going to say, that must have been fascinating.
Yeah, it was.
Did he try and teach you any of the techniques, or were you just a little bit?
No, just, I was still kind of little, but, he'd let me pack stuff, things like that. Okay. But it was really interesting to watch. It was, I guess, actually a very productive business. So, but he died. He died actually he died of a heart attack. He was only 61 when he died. So, but, that.
So, your mom, did she have an occupation, or was she kind of?
No, she was pretty much the housewife. She was she left her home very early in life and went to Athens and lived with her godmother, who was kind of well off, and she learned a lot about household and cooking. She was a phenomenal cook, an absolutely phenomenal cook, and while she was here in Greece or in the United States after I was born. Her sister was a widow and had 3 youngsters who were war orphans, more or less. And my father said, we need to bring them here to the United States. And he did.
Okay. So did you have any brothers and sisters?
No, I'm an only child.
So did these 3 children then come to live with you?
Yes, they did.
So they became your step
they were we were first cousins.
Okay.
So, and they're all still living. One is now in Greece. He's a widower in his 80s, and the other one lives in Addison, Illinois. My cousin Nick, and he and his wife are great grandparents. And my cousin Kathy, she lives in Arizona. She's a widow. But my dad told my mom, I want to bring your family here so that you, if anything happens to me, you have your family close by. So that was...
As a child, were there any people, national figures or just local people who you looked up to, you think inspired you, that maybe helped you somewhere down the road?
Mostly my teachers. I think I've been very, very fortunate to have some phenomenal educators in my life who would kind of show you the right way and say, try this, try that. Don't be shy, those kinds of things, and encouraged you. But a big influence in my life was pretty much my mother. She was remarkably became much more intelligent the older I got. She was a very, very wise woman, and had a very simple philosophy. You need to be honest. When you do something, do it right. If something isn't yours, don't touch it, and do good things. That's pretty much what...
That's very good philosophy to have.
And, she...
So you went to what high school was you went to?
Waller High. It's an academy now, I think.
Okay.
Waller High was just about 3 blocks away from home.
What were some of your favorite subjects?
I liked biology, those kinds of, and English literature, those types of things. Math was not my strong suit. Though I did well in algebra, but geometry, that was a bomb. Couldn't handle that.
So after high school, where did you went to college, you said?
Yes, I applied to several places. Was accepted at DeKalb, Loyola, and of course Northern. And I decided Northern was the place to go. My mom wasn't happy about that because I was never out of the house overnight at any point in my life, because very strict upbringing.
Was that kind of an intentional then? You spread your wings a little bit by going out?
I must have. I was only 17. I was very, very young at the time, and I thought, this might not be a bad thing. It was rough, though. It was a different experience. I was not as disciplined as things came easily to me at school when I was younger, but college is a whole different routine. So you really had to learn how to discipline yourself in order to get through. And then again, I always wanted to be a teacher, so that was the path that I followed.
Right, and I was very strong in teaching.
It was very, very, very strong, and I was very, 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 very fortunate to have Sophie. That's Sophie, who's also deciding to talk a lot.
Sophie's telling us her story, but we're not quite understanding it.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, no, NIU was a great experience. About a year or so into the time I was here in DeKalb, Sophie, quiet. There was a program in Chicago called Urban Renewal, and our area of the city was up for urban renewal, so they wanted to take the apartment building and so on, and we didn't have much choice, so a decision was made. It was kind of silly for my mom to be there by herself and me here to be going to school, so we moved to DeKalb. And we looked around to find a place, and we actually rented an apartment, which was where the post office is now. It was above the old Dixie Inn.
In the town a long time, but I do not recall the Dixie Inn.
Yeah, there was a Dixie Inn. It was a little restaurant. And so we rented the apartment upstairs, and after about a year, we met this phenomenal realtor, Marshall McCabe, and he sold us this house.
What year did you buy this house?
68.
68, okay, so that's 6 years after my family moved in on Sunset, just over there.
Yep, 68. And it was only about $24,000. I can't even imagine. You can't even get a car for that much anymore.
Well, that's worth at least $28,000 now.
At least. So anyway, that's how so we've been here a very long time.
So you graduated from NIU?
Yep.
And what did you do after you graduated?
While I was going to NIU, I was also working as a nurse's aide at the old DeKalb Public Hospital, which of course now is Barb City Manor. And I was always interested, as I had mentioned before, in biology and healthcare and stuff. So I found that interesting. And back then, in about 71, it was difficult to find a job as a teacher because there weren't that many jobs. And so I continued working as a nurse's aide, and then I started taking classes at Kish, thinking, okay, I'll get a degree in nursing too. That way I can fall back on one or the other. But in the meantime, a job came along, and I took it.
Okay. And
and the job was in Genoa, Kingston, GK. And it ended up that I worked there for a total of 39 years.
Was that the high school or?
Actually, 5th grade. That's where I started. I had 20 plus years as a 5th grade teacher, and then later in my teaching career, I taught Title I in reading for some of the little ones, the little Rugrats, the Munchkins, and then I ended up at the middle school for the latter part of my career.
Okay.
So,
right. So were you involved in politics much when you were a teacher in GK?
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, my principal, Dave Burrows, he was really big in the Democratic Party, and I got involved with him, and I got to meet up with a lot of the people who were the local Democrats, and I would do the old, go knocking on doors, filling out cards, making phone calls, doing those kinds of things. And Martin David Dubin, both Dave and Martin are now gone. Martin's, I had been teaching for about 3 years. And he says, you should run for city council. And I said, what? I said, I don't even know where City Hall is. What are you talking about? He says, no, I think you would be, you do, you'll learn. He says, you'll learn. So I called Dave, who was in many ways my mentor, and a very wise principal. Good. And I said, Dave, they want me to run for city council. I said, what do I do? And his exact words were, do it, dummy. So, okay. He says, don't worry, we'll fill the void between your ears. You'll learn. And it was a great experience. I never expected to win. But I ran against 4 other men, and I was the only woman who ran. And there, lo and behold, I was on the city council.
What year was this?
Oh gosh, 73-ish or so, 70
Okay,
somewhere
I
around.
didn't realize you had been an alderperson that early.
Oh yeah. Quite. Yeah, it was under Mayor Van Patter. Yeah, Van Pat. And it was a phenomenal. The whole thing was a phenomenal experience. Again, Martin, as I mentioned before, I've just been blessed having some absolutely very intelligent, very knowledgeable people in my life who were there to explain things, to kind of lead you in the right direction, to give you food for thought, and to rein you in when you needed reining in. And Martin said, it's important, he said, that you bring out ideas in a campaign. He says, of course it's important to win, but it's ideas that you need to bring forward so that someday, somehow, they will be incorporated for the better good.
How many terms did you serve?
Several. They were consecutive terms.
Until you ran for mayor?
Until I ran for mayor. Actually, is it 5 terms? Yeah, I think it was 5, but I didn't finish the 5th term because in the middle of that term I became mayor. So I served as alderman for 22 years.
Okay, all right.
And actually, it's the longest. I'm the longest continually seated alderman in the history of DeKalb.
Okay, all right. So what was it that made you decide to run for mayor?
I thought that the mayor at the time was not looking out for the city in the right way, and I had told him that if I find that the city is being hurt in any way, shape, or form, I'm going to try to change that. And I decided to run. We needed a change.
So let me just bring up a little interesting aside. I did a commercial for your campaign.
I remember that.
But I also did a commercial for your competitor. Because basically, I was doing stuff for the cable system, so I found that interesting. But then the other thing is that Martin Dubin, my mom, was also one of your campaign managers for mayor.
Oh, absolutely. At the beginning, a long time ago, Ellen and your mother, Ellen, we were on opposite ends of the political spectrum. But over the years, we got to know each other, and she was just phenomenal in tempering your thoughts and helping you understand issues and fleshing out ideas, because she was a pretty wise lady herself.
So thank you for saying that. So when you became mayor, what were some of your successes? But I'm guessing that there might have been a failure or two also. No politician ever 100%
It was very difficult to deal with the culture in City Hall after a mayor who had been there for 16 years. It's not easy to break into that culture. And I was not very well received or accepted, but mostly by some of the people at the top of the food chain, so to speak. But as time went on, I made it kind of clear that the council and the public, as long as I'm sitting here, are going to be as informed as possible, because sometimes the bureaucrats like to maneuver information, say, oh, well, we really don't need to bring that up, and council doesn't really need to know. I said, well, yeah, they do. They actually do, because if they're going to be making decisions, they need to have as much information as possible. And we did some things with the Landlord Tenant Ordinance to help students. That was I'm really sorry about Griffin. He likes to talk a little bit himself. And the other ordinance that was put forth was the HRC ordinance, where it talked about gender equality. That was extremely contentious, and people were very afraid to. It was a difficult time. We had 2 or 3 4-hour meetings where people would come forth, but one of the things that made me think that we did do the right thing in passing this very forward-thinking amendment to the HRC, I got a note from John Castle, who was at the time, and it's kind of retired more or less now, very prominent person in the community. He said, I know it was difficult, but you did the right thing. So something like that, from someone who represents a more conservative point of view, to say that, I thought, gee,
Well, those are still issues that we're dealing with today.
And I know, and I'm thinking, come on, we have made some progress. Come on, let's.
Yeah, so let's back up a little bit. You were the second female mayor, Judy King.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about Judy King.
Judy King was mayor, and then Judy didn't finish her term either, and Sue Baresi became the interim.
Okay, I think.
But she was not elected; she was appointed to that position. Judy and I, we had a back and forth kind of a relationship. There were some things that we agreed upon, and other things that we disagreed. She was much more politically polished than I was as alderman at that time. She was also very forward-thinking. Thanks to some of her initiatives, Barb City Manor is what it is today, and the Egyptian Theater is what it is today.
She was the mayor during PET when Barb.
That was. She was very, very involved. Of course, Judy has a huge theater background, and so she was very, very forward-thinking, and that's a good thing. She did some very, very solid, very good things for the community. But she went to work for, I think it was Senator Dixon, as an aide.
All right. So tell me about maybe 1 or 2 things that didn't work out as well as you had hoped as mayor. Or did you get everything you wanted?
Well, that's kind of hard to. I would like to have been able to clarify some of the liquor issues a little bit better. Those took up way too much time, and I would have liked to have seen that come to more full circle, because it was kind of a mess when we got in there. I would also like to have been able to do some more ordinances that dealt with housing, so we could address some of those issues. But we weren't able, if you're not elected again, you can't move along as fast as you would like. Also blessed with a very good, for most of my tenure as mayor, with a good city manager. Jim Connors was, Bill Nicholas was there to begin with, but he left just a few months into my term.
Okay, yeah, I knew Jim. He was in that one. He
Yeah.
left for, I think, West Chicago.
Yes. And huge professional, wonderful professional. He knew his stuff, and he knew how to expedite things, and he would lay things out for the council and say, here are your choices, here's the impact of this, that, and the other. And had we had a little bit more time, I would love to have been able to work with him and the council. We had a pretty decent council too.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and the other thing that we did, and this was a bone of contention at the very beginning. That was when Welsh Park, we got a grant with the Park District for Welsh Park, because at the time the people who owned University Village, they wanted to expand it. And we thought, no. That we need more green space in that area. So we had to fight for that. And oddly enough, one of the people that I had to fight the most was the city manager, Bill Nicholas. He says, we can't afford to do that. I said, we can't afford not to do that. So he tried to stop that from happening, which was not his place. That is the council's decision as to how they want the city to develop. And it was a good decision. I think that was a very wise decision at the time. Otherwise, we would have had even more congestion there now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fairly dense area.
Yeah.
So I want to go back to this. Occurred to me when we shot your commercial for mayor. We did it at the Glidden Homestead.
Jesse's.
And Jesse was involved in that. So tell us a little bit about your relationship with Jesse Glidden.
Oh, boy. Jesse and Bessie. Again, another lady who was years ahead of her time. She was unbelievably progressive. You would think that someone who is that much older, living in a conservative community, would be not at all. Very forward-thinking, very supportive. She was very supportive of young women. And she says, you go out there, you go get them. And then you do what you think and always listen to your gut. So she was always very, very encouraging and very supportive.
Okay. All right. So what did you do after you left the mayorship?
I just continued doing what I always did, teaching.
Okay. So you were a teacher through that entire time?
Oh, yeah. That was probably one of the most difficult times in my life. It was 4 years of 18-hour days nonstop, continually, between teaching and mayoring, taking care of a home. It was tough. It was very tough. It almost killed me.
So when you retired, what have you been doing in retirement?
Well, I retired in
you haven't
20.
You didn't run the office afterwards. Right?
No. It's kind of like it was when I retired from teaching. I went in to get the renewals for the certificates at the fingerprint. You have to be fingerprinted now. And I said, now, after 39 years of teaching, now you're going to fingerprint me. And I did that with the thought of going back and doing some substitute teaching once in a while. Didn't do it. Didn't walk back in. Finally you decide, I'm done. I'm finished. I did my thing. 39 years is a long stint. It's time to move on with your life. So same thing with, I pulled back from other than some community types of things. And I got involved a lot with our church. And helped out and volunteered there, and took care of home and that type of thing.
Okay, yeah. Anybody who reads the Chronicle knows that you're still active. Tell us a little bit something about just what keeps you interested now.
A few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there was silly dog. There was an issue that came up with the Kiwanis Park on the south side, where the soccer fields are. it was rumored that they wanted to do a land swap, that the school district wanted to do a land swap with a developer, Shodine. And I remember going to that meeting, wait a minute, this isn't right. Something is not right here. And they said, oh, we have no need for that land. We have no, and I read that in the paper. And I said, you're kidding me. You're going to give up 30 years worth of soccer fields? So one thing led to another, and myself and several other people banded together. We spent some money on signs, we ran petitions, we went to a multitude of meetings, and by golly, we saved the soccer fields. And ever since that, by going back to meetings, I started sitting at the council meetings, especially because I'm more familiar with how those were run, and I could not believe the amount of disconnect between the various governmental entities, and I said, something is not right here. So I just kept on going back and advocating for this and that, and I haven't stopped.
Okay, so let's wrap it up with what do you want people to remember about Bessie Chronopolis?
That I'm just a nice little person who likes to help people. That's pretty much it, who cares about her community and her country and animals, even though they are not always very well behaved.
Okay.
So that's it.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Very nice. Thank you.